And actually I have a CD series on this that goes into more detail. I'm going to try to share it in about 7 minutes, so bear with me. My wife and I had been worshiping one night late. This was about 1990. And she had gone on to bed, and suddenly I was in the Spirit. And I saw the Lord and my angel, and I was sitting on our sofa and love seat. We had a sofa and love seat in an L-shaped with a 3-cushion sofa one way, and then a 2-cushion smaller sofa called love seat the other way, with a table at the juncture there at the point of the L. And I was sitting on that L of that small love seat, and the Lord came over, and I'm in the Spirit. You've got to understand, I see with my eyes wide open, yet I'm also seeing the Lord. I see both realms at once. And the Lord comes and sits down in the corner of the sofa there. And he puts his arm over on a stack of magazines that we had in the corner on the table. And unfortunately for me at this time, none of those magazines was Christian. They were National Geographics mainly, and a couple other things like that. And the Lord sat down. Now, if you were to look at it in the natural, you just see me sitting kind of sideways, on the love seat, looking at the corner of that sofa. But in the Spirit, that was the Lord there. So I saw him in the Spirit, and I saw him take the top page of that National Geographic, and he flipped through it, just went like that with his thumb, just like that. And I knew that he was taking in information that was in those pages. Now, again, if you were just there in the natural, you just see me sitting there looking at that corner. But in the Spirit, that's what the Lord was doing. And then the Lord looked down, and then there was an awkward moment of silence there, because I wasn't sure. It's like, okay, the Lord is just reading a National Geographic. How does he feel about that? And I said, Lord, does this offend you? I broke the silence finally, saying, Lord, does this offend you? And he looked up at me and he said, it's not whether it offends me or not. It's that there's no life in these pages. And that's all the visitation that I shared for years, probably 15 years, because the rest of it was personal. But I started sharing it in the last 5 or 8 years ago, 5 or 10 years ago, just to share the rest of it. Because then the Lord looked up and he said, I want to teach you about holiness. And when he said that, suddenly I was standing before him while he was still seated. And out of his eyes came pencil-thin streams of liquid love that was coming right out at me and coming to my eyes and going down into my being. And this wall of this line of love, of liquid love between his eyes and my eyes, also about right between us, also formed a wall. And it would come out and form a wall of what was like water. And it was like 20 feet tall or 30 feet tall, which would be, 10 meters or so tall, and like 60 feet wide, 15, 20 meters wide. And not only the tops were like a breaking wave that was about to crash on the beach, but the sides of it, the vertical sides, were crashing like that too. And I remember standing there thinking, I'm going to get wet. I remember looking at that and thinking, I'm going to get wet. All the while, his love is just pouring into my eyes. And it was like rooting out every single objection I had about being loved. And I share this with you because it was personal, but I saw and I heard myself as it came up out of me. I saw a sentence that said, you can't love me because my father left me when I was 11 years old. And I saw this sentence somehow come out of my mouth. It wasn't voluntary. It was just like this water was so much saturating on the inside of me that it just forced all the junk up to the top. And out came this sentence. I'll share that one sentence with you. There weren't that many objections, but this was one of the major ones. And then I saw this sentence separate letter to letter across this vast, remember, like 30 feet tall, 60 feet wide wall of water. And then each letter was not only separated, but then before I knew the term, today I'd call it pixels, but each letter was broken down into individual dots, and then all those dots, and it was just absorbed into that wall of liquid love, that water, that liquid love. And every reason, every argument I could come up against or come up with about why he could not love me just was melted into that. And I realized, once again, as I did on the October 1st, 1986 visitation, some 4 years earlier, that I was his creation and he was pleased with what he'd created. It had nothing to do with my spirituality or my sins, how good I was or how bad I was, how perfect I was or how immature I was. It had nothing to do with that. It was the fact that he had created me and he was pleased with what he had created. And that love was based on that he loved his creation. All my faults, all my foibles, all the frailties of humanity. And then the arguments just poured into this and just were absorbed in this love. And suddenly I was standing in heaven. And I mean, I was just transported. I don't know the hows and the whys, but I was just transported into that heaven. And I was standing there among a group of people, and I looked at people, and I'd look at a person, and I saw, like one guy, I remember in particular, the first guy I looked at, and I saw that somewhere in life he had lied, he had shaded the truth, he had made himself look better at the expense of a friend. Different things like that, where he had shaded the truth and done stuff like that. And I thought, wow, he wasn't purely transparent. He wasn't whole in his life all the time. He sometimes shaded the truth. He hid behind, fears and worries and stuff like that, and put on a fake spiritual, brave face type of thing. And then I looked at another person, and then another person. Pretty soon it became like one of those movie scenes where they just blur, goes past you when they're switching scenes to show something. And I was going like, boom, 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 all over the place. And there were millions of people. And I looked down front, and I looked down, and there down front was, and I say this because this was like like the Rose Bowl. This was like a Wembley Stadium. This was like much larger than that and much more relaxed, like a grassy hillside type of thing, but all around millions and millions of people. And there was the Father down front, and there was Jesus standing there next to him. And I realized when I was looking around at all the people that everyone had shaded the truth or put themselves over a brother or sister or lied or did something that wasn't completely transparent. And I looked down at the Father and the Son and realized they were the only ones present who had never ever shaded the truth, who had never ever had an ulterior motive towards somebody, but they always only wanted each person's best, and they were the only ones in the whole place, and they were so transparent and so pure in their motives. And suddenly, I was back before the Lord, and all that water started crashing in and started coming in, and then it hit and went right in my eyes and right down on the inside of me, and it just washed everything away. I just saw just the transparency of the Lord. And suddenly I was able to sit down because of the effect of this. I needed to sit down, and I'm sitting down with the Lord, and I said, Lord, you are worthy to be worshipped. You are worthy to be praised. You are worthy to be glorified. You are pure, and you are holy, and you are completely transparent with us. The thoughts that you have for us, the plans that you have for us, they are for our good. You are worthy to be worshipped. And he looked at me, and he said this. He said, this transparency is the essence of holiness. I'll never forget that. He said, this transparency is the essence of holiness. And when he said that, all sorts of scriptures started coming to mind. Like Paul said, greet one another with a holy kiss. And realizing in that culture, a kiss on the cheek is a covenant kiss. It says, I'm never going to betray you. I'm never going to use you. I'm never going to abuse you. I'm never going to treat you wrong. And that's why Paul said, greet one another with a holy kiss, and I saw all the elements of it that of transparency, that we're to be completely transparent with one another. That doesn't mean we share intimate secrets, everything, but our motives and our hearts and our actions towards others are always transparent. And I saw all these scriptures just boom, boom, boom. Judas betraying Jesus with a kiss, trying to force him to become, to prove himself to the Messiah, and what a betrayal that was. And I remembered in the Greek word worship, the word worship is pros kuneo. In the Greek, the word worship, pros kuneo, pros means towards and kuneo means kiss. The word worship in the New Testament is literally to kiss towards God, to send a kiss towards God, and how our worship is to be covenant kiss. It's supposed to be, I am transparent before you, Father God. This is my heart. This is why I love you. This is why I'm saying you are worthy to be worshiped and glorified and honored. And all of that just hit me right there. And I said, but Lord, I said, if you're that transparent, it sets you up to be hurt, to be used, and to be misunderstood. And tears were coming to my eyes, and tears started coming to his eyes. And he repeated himself. He said, this transparency is the essence of holiness. And I saw that in my life that I had to be transparent, I had to be honest, I had to be pure. I had to only want the best of each person that I come in contact with, to have no ulterior motives. Let others read ulterior motives into my life and everything, because they've got so much baggage and they're laying somebody else's sins at my feet or something. But for me, I have to be transparent. And that's the way we're supposed to be. And that's why the Lord taught me about holiness, how he taught me about holiness. It has nothing to do with hairstyle and length of a skirt, or how men you cut your hair, and ladies whether you wear makeup or not. Holiness is a thing of the heart, where you are transparent before God, transparent before brothers and sisters, and you live out that transparency. The living out of that honest, godly transparency is in fact holiness. All right, I just leave you with that. I've got to cut it short. My time is off here. So I hope that's a blessing to you. Take those two things with you, the transparency, and then before that, what do you feed yourself? Jesus looked at that magazine and he said, it's not that it offends me or not, it's that there's no life in these pages. Look for life, people. Feed on life. Think of the movies, think of the TV, think of how we spend our